Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 305th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. Last episode, I spoke about cultural fit and how it's causing systemic bias. If you listened to that episode, did you enjoy it? Did any of it resonate with you? Let me know via the details at the end of today's show. Don't forget the podcast is now fortnightly, but if you're missing weekly content, you have 6 years worth of episodes to listen to. And if you want my handy guide that lists the episodes with a clickable link, you can get it at diverseminds.co.uk/downloads. So this series of the podcast are all about diversity disconnect. Well, we're very disconnected right now, aren't we? From the backlash against wokeness, we only need to see the reaction against Hannah Spencer stating that, quote unquote, you can smell the alcohol when people are in between votes in Parliament, and added that there had been some cases of questionable and dangerous behaviour by staff and potentially some MPs because of the unprofessional culture of drinking. She's been attacked. When I would say for 95% of jobs, you cannot drink at work, of course, for health and safety reasons, and rightly so. So given that this is seen to be problematic, I got to thinking about diversity strategies and people, organizations writing strategies on paper, and does it really cut it? I would say not, as it feels removed from people's lived experiences. And a piece of paper, website, is often performative because it highlights really glossy, ambitious goals with no real substance about how it's going to get done or who's going to do it. So a diversity and inclusion PR stunt in the workplace is superficial, performative actions where a company talk about diversity, equality, inclusion when trending to enhance their reputation. Maybe it's to win an award without having to make or without wanting to make any real structural changes. Other synonyms, things you might have heard, are diversity washing, tokenism, performative activism, such as high-profile performative initiatives like social media posts that lack depth rather than investing in meaningful change. And I think a prime example for me was when organizations were posting about the war in Ukraine and then saying nothing about Palestine, Sudan, Congo, etc. And this has been going for many years. That's not to say they shouldn't have been speaking out about the war in Ukraine, but it's the way in which it was done and whose lives are more valued. It's also around surface level marketing, so using diverse imagery in recruitment adverts. A really famous example of this is university prospectuses. So, global majority students then turn up and think, well, this is nothing like the prospectus, and the organization maintains a homogenous, non-inclusive staff, but the imageries would tell you another story. And a stunt element can be isolated initiatives without ongoing, measurable, sustainable change. So for me, that's celebrating awareness days, which is important, but then there's none of the work that goes underneath that and no one to lead that work. And I think with global economic uncertainty, many organizations are cutting budgets or have indeed cut budgets already. In fact, I talked to a good friend this morning about a serious issue that's going on in their workplace, and actions that signal these initiatives were never a priority. So do you hear anyone talking about Black Lives Matter at corporate level anymore? Because I certainly don't. And yet we still know there is huge disparity in experience of Black staff and colleagues in institutions and organizations, in society, in schools, etc. So it hasn't gone away. And interestingly, Deloitte's global survey of 23,000 Gen Zs and millennials, now in its 14th year, has found that these generations, so younger millennials and Gen Zs, are focused on growth and learning as they pursue money, meaning, and well-being. And in a Guardian article from April 2025, the Employment Lawyers Association, the ELA, which has 7,000 members, had said British companies could open themselves up to quote unquote adverse findings or discrimination if they unpick policies designed to enable diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in an open letter to businesses, Casper Glynn KC, the chair of the ELA, said that defending a company against discriminatory acts made by an employee was already difficult, but would be quote unquote hopeless without DEI policies in place. Glynn also said employers without DEI policies would be unlikely to be able to demonstrate that they had taken all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment, for example, which they are legally required to do. The Employment Rights Bill, which became the Employment Rights Act 2025, passing into law on 18th December 2025, is going to strengthen or has strengthened that requirement. And I've put the link in the show notes to the Guardian article because it is really, really helpful to see that in writing. So you might say to me, well, you're saying that a strategy is a stunt, but clearly you believe in policy, you think it's important. And I think the two are slightly different. I think, of course, you could mention your policies in a strategy. Policies are essential, and I'm not for one moment suggesting we get rid of those. But as I always talk about, you've got to make policies relevant and lively and keep reminding people of them. Now, a strategy, and you might have equality objectives, which are, of course, required in public sector, and that is a minimum of 3 objectives. Of course, they need to be published, but do you actually need a strategy? And is there a better way to do this? Because we can have all the strategies in the world, and we can have strategies on corporate social responsibility, strategies on recycling, but yet nothing seems to go in the right direction. And I think what happens is that when we have these glossy, shiny strategies and a big launch and a nice party and a dinner or a lunch where senior people are invited, and remember, it's very rare that outsourced staff are ever invited to these types of events. And in fact, I had a very interesting discussion a number of months ago with a medium-sized organization about this, and how one member, I was running some focus groups, felt very angry, rightly so, that they were always excluded. So the security staff, the cleaning staff, the catering staff, and these are really integral, important people in any organization. So going back to this idea of performance, they can also have, the thing with performative actions is they fail to enhance productivity or innovation. So then people, managers, in particular middle managers, start to question things and the value of why are we even doing this? And I know that people have had their fingers badly burnt by very poor, boring, dull equality, diversity, and inclusion training. And because I see these people come into the room looking almost like they're going to roll their eyes and thinking, oh my goodness, what is she going to tell me I can't do today? And I know this is going to be boring. And most of the time, I would say 98% of the time, people will come up to me at the end of the course and say, oh my gosh, that was so good. And I really didn't think we'd have the time to speak. So if people have had their fingers burnt, no matter how good a trainer or a training session might be, if that's happened, they don't want to do it, there's more disengagement. So if you want to know more about mandatory training, do check out episode 250. Do we have to do mandatory training, where I talk about that particular element? There's also management resistance, I think, particularly from a middle to senior management level, not necessarily senior leader level. But if these kind of efforts around equity, diversity, and inclusion feel restrictive, prescriptive, like stunts, that they really do annoy people because, again, it's like, oh my goodness, you're putting something on my to-do list that I don't want to have to do, rather than an empowering action. And many senior managers, according to the CIPD, may resist, ignore, or bypass them, or try and find a way around it. But like a child who's been grounded, and they try and find other ways around things. And of course, there's a time and resource strain, because what we've seen over the last 15 years is actually a significant amount of investment in proper initiatives that have made some change. Then it's withdrawn, then some gets put back in, then it's withdrawn again. So if there is this kind of plans with no long-term sustainability and no real power policy, it can really overwhelm an organization, and there can be a flurry of work in this area, followed by a cutback, followed by redundancies, and then having to start all over again. And if you look at the cost implication of that, that is enormous. There's also tokenism, so it might be hiring one or two quote unquote diverse candidates for optics, one-off training, so it's a tick list and then no follow-up. And especially when you get people saying, we want this in 30 minutes. And as always, there is a difference between information and tacit knowledge, and you cannot help people with the knowledge if you're just giving the information. And of course, a lack of leadership buy-in. So this is just a bolt-on, a nice to have, a checklist. I'm really not interested in this. We've really got to get down to making money, saving money, delivering services in a particular way. And then, of course, no metrics to start with. So we don't know what the starting point is, what the baseline is, and then no metrics to measure progress or hold anyone accountable. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and want to keep up to date. If you are, then why not join my newsletter? When you join my mailing list, you can now choose the download you would like. Just go to diverseminds.co.uk/downloads and choose the resource that works best for you. Okay, so I've outlined all the stuff, all the challenges, all the difficulties. What do we actually do? So my first point, and I did a bit of research about this, and I think it depends on how you see the word strategy. And remember, I am not saying get rid of your policies, far from it. But do we need a glossy strategy with lovely graphics and design? Do you need one? Controversial. Yes, potentially you might. But what good is a strategy when people don't read the information? They need an awful lot of spoon feeding about how it impacts and what they need to do to change or do things differently in their roles. When I say get rid of a strategy, I am saying, does it need to be called a strategy and be verbose? No, I'm talking about a succinct and powerful action plan backed with training, guidance, information to enable people from across an organization to enact an action plan that will incorporate elements of policy. So there's just recently the consultation closed on 25th of March 2026 about mandatory ethnicity and disability pay gap reporting for large employers over 250 people. It's looking like this means they will be required, large organizations will be required to publish 6 key pay gap metrics and new workforce compensation data, according to the government proposals. And I'm really happy about this because I think data and accountability are more powerful than a strategy. It also stops wasting time on FOIs, so the information is there for large organizations. So I think this is really, really positive. And of course, it's part of policy, it's part of compliance. Great. So, do you need a strategy? You need an action plan to address the gaps because strategies, I think, can go off and be very verbose. And we know there's likely to be very significant pay gaps in these areas, particularly, I think, around long-term sickness, sensory disabilities, potentially mobility disabilities, but that depends on how good workplace adjustments are. And of course, potentially neurodivergence as well. We've also got the Worker Protection Act 2023. So that's strengthened duties to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. So of course, we need policies for that, but that can be put into an action plan. Also, action plans. So by 2026-27, large employers are expected to prepare mandatory gender pay gap and menopause action plans. Brilliant. So the other thing you could push back with me is, well, Layla, you're saying you don't need a strategy, but these action plans are going to be really long and lengthy. And so if we don't have a strategy around this, it's just going to be a long list of actions and no one's going to be any the wiser. Okay, so that's fair. And I would say go back to that point then, do you need a strategy? The answer might be yes. But if it's a small organization, let's say you're an organization of 50 people, you may not need a very big action plan. Your action plan might be able to fit on 2 pages. And within that, you can have an internal one with named people and an external one that looks at your commitments. So maybe that's better than a strategy. But if it's a large organization, of course, and you're multi-site, multi-country, then yes, it might well make sense to do that. But the key here is it shouldn't be a PR stunt. It shouldn't be this beautiful glossy document. And then in 3 years' time, it's like, yeah, Amber, no, nothing's really changed. And interestingly, the Financial Conduct Authority's got new rules coming in from the 1st of September 2026, which will make non-financial misconduct, so things that are not involved in finances, so this will include bullying and harassment, a regulatory issue for 30,000 financial firms. So really, really exciting, actually. So things like bullying, harassment, discrimination, violence will count as a direct breach of the FCA's conduct rules across nearly all UK financial services firms. So how they're going to monitor that, I don't know. But there has to be accountability. So does a strategy really do all of that? We can say things, but if people are having a horrific time, having to go to employment tribunal, having to leave, being made to sign non-disclosure agreements, what good is a strategy in that case, really? Because what we need to do is to move from these high visibility, high profile campaigns to embedded positive behavior embedded in daily practice. Ownership being in HR, very reactive, very, it sits over there. To every manager, employee being skilled, having conversations about it, there being space to do that, and actually having very up-to-date, skilled employment lawyers, because HR do often fall short in many areas. Not always, and it depends on the organization, but we really need to sort of up the game here. And the other thing that goes with that, of course, is psychological safety, the buzzword, and do listen to episode 245, What is Psychological Safety at Work for more information. But in order for there to be psychological safety, we need to look at why it's not safe and also the baggage we bring from our personal lives. And I'm not talking about giving everyone therapy, but the kind of political game playing that goes on, the chess playing. Why does that happen? What's at stake for people? And, are organizations prepared to do this? And if so, how? So it should be around particularly large organizations working with organizational psychologists, being able to say some of this is going to be really uncomfortable. What is this culture around winning? So, and is that really helpful? Is that particularly inclusive to lots of people for lots of reasons? I think the other thing is to move from optics to outcome. So a strategy is really ineffective if leaders are not held accountable. And I would love to see more kind of in equity and inclusion and diversity targets, goals, if you like, directly linked to leadership performance evaluation. So that could be pay, that could be bonuses. Now, this isn't always possible because, of course, public sector, there isn't a bonus scheme generally. So it's very different. Private sector sales targets, yes, that could absolutely be done. But we could think about in public sector reward and recognition. And one thing I used to talk about a lot was competition and league tables. You know, in big organizations, you can have different teams who has done particular activities well related to this area and have a competition or league table. Someone needs to take ownership of that, but that can often really, really work well. And I don't mean it in a tokenistic way, but it can really help people to move in the right direction with, of course, reward and recognition. There's also this kind of keepers of the talent pipeline, tapping people on the shoulder, who gets the role. We talked about, you know, moving towards a homogenous group of people, implicit, explicit bias, all of that. And I think we have to move away from this risk aversion of, oh, they're not the right person because, you know, they look like this, they are like this, they have a disability, or I think they're just, they talk about their sexual orientation too much in the workplace, whatever it is. And think about, how do we test for skills? What can we support people with in terms of their learning journey? And not looking at a ready-made package, because people leave jobs very quickly now. And so this kind of keeping people in the team that are very similar to one another, I don't think is going to work. And I don't think it does work. There's also a point about systemic redesign in terms of how staff, there's also a point about systemic redesign in terms of training programs. So instead of one-off workshops, oh no, we've had an incident, quick, we need a bullying and harassment training. Why are we not doing this from the very start? So induction or onboarding, as it's now called, staff who have maybe been in an organization for a long time, a new program of work. So this is really important. And so it's a suite of options. It can contribute to certification. People can build their own learning and development portfolio, and a variety of topics, you know, the hard skills related to their role, but also what's viewed as softer skills. So positive conversations, managing conflict, all these sorts of things, and a suite of ongoing programs of work. And I think that's much better. And then can feed into to the learning and development team, or, you know, how it's working, what someone's learned, because I think without that, it's just too piecemeal. Now we can't ignore what is an elephant in the room for me, which is using AI. And this really needs to be, this is definitely a policy piece. And I know some organizations are really looking into this, but you've got to have governance around it to reduce biases, or to really be clear about how people are using it. And of course, giving people time and space to do their jobs and use their own brain. Because what we're seeing is people just typing whatever they want into AI, and it just not being as effective as it could be, and not using it in the best way alongside their brains. So this to me is really, really important. And then I saw something that was really brilliant and that I love. And if you do this in your organization, please let me know, is to create a D&I excuse bingo card with common cop-outs such as, we're trying, but change takes time. We don't have the budget right now. We can't find diverse candidates. Our industry's just like this. Oh, we can't fix the problem at the school level. So this is brilliant. So can you carry these with you and hand them out every time you hear these things? And it might relate to other areas as well, like the environment, corporate social responsibility, etc. This is excellent. And I think if we can put these on the table and call people out, I wonder if it would make change or get people to start rephrasing and thinking differently. And we know that language can shape mindset. So I think that is an excellent, excellent thing to do. If you do this in your organization, as I said, please let me know. And I think the final thing for me is about moving from allyship to coalition and sponsorship. And I've talked about this before, based on Emma Dabiri's book, From Allyship to Coalition. And I've also used the resource from Recipes for Wellbeing, and I've included the link in the show notes. So this is about mutuality. So coalition building is concerned with identifying shared interests, focusing on the source of the problem. And Emma Dabiri talks about the fact that you can remain mindful of the different textures of our varied but interconnected struggles. So it's shifting from that individual to system. So why is the gender pay gap? This is really important. And actually, if we could look at it in detail, we probably find that single female parents are experiencing more of a pay gap, for example. So we might be in a different situation. We might be a parent, we might be a female parent, we might not be a single female parent. So it's interconnected but varied. So it shifts from individuals to systems. Allyship relies on the quote unquote good behavior of individuals, and as such can be quite precarious. Coalition builds on shifting the focus to challenge oppressive systems, and it's much more empowering. Allyship can appeal to people's desire to want to be a savior, and potentially, if it's not managed well, perpetuate a power imbalance. But coalition is about saying we've got a common ground. So this is really, really important, and having those conversations. And then if we think about it like this, allyship is often described as I'm helping you, which can feel again savior-like, paternalistic. Coalition or solidarity is I'm in this with you because our own lives or communities are also diminished by this systemic abuse. So for me, an example of this might be, and this might seem like quite a basic example, and you've probably heard me talk about it before, but cream paper for many neurodivergent conditions. So cream paper really helps with, can really help with reading, can really help with reducing glare. And actually, for those of us who don't experience this phenomenon or have neurodivergent conditions, it's actually better anyway. We can read and see better. So that might be an example that you say, why don't we just print everything on cream paper? No one has to declare or disclose if they need it, and it's just there. So that's an example. That's very, very basic, but that is an example. Now, I want to also touch on sponsorship and talk about this is sharing power and resources. So it's about this action. It's really, really action focused. Leaders sharing power, risk, and responsibility, shifting from this mentorship, oh, I share my hurdles, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, to going, no, I hear you, and this is what I'm going to do about it. It's about actively intervening. It's not about waiting for or relying on any marginalized communities to identify the issues and talk to you about them and say there's this, which can be exhausting. But it's intervening when you see racism, discrimination, calling things out, looking at the systemic injustice and changing it, and building also, I think one part of sponsorship is building a network of peers who hold one another accountable for commitment as well. So sponsorship can be summarized as I will use my privilege and power to directly advance your position or provide opportunities for you to network with other people if I can't give you advance your position right here, right now. So D&I strategies can look glossy and sit quietly, but do they make systemic change? I think not, but reflect on this for your own organization. We do need accountability. We do need to be compliant. We do need to abide by the law, and we do need to publish data and have information. But is a strategy the best way to do this? Senior leaders need to think radically and be prepared to be uncomfortable, as do middle managers, I think. And we need to move from surface level to tangible action, such as calling it out with humor if required, doing things differently, and making systemic change, not the same old lovely events on repeat, which make certain people feel good and maintain the status quo. So what do you think about what I've said? I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, I run workshops, training sessions, and keynotes for organizations, all about creating positive, equal, happy workplaces. So do get in touch with me at Layla, Leyla, at diverseminds.co.uk. And I really hope you've enjoyed today's show and the shows over the last 6 years. So if you have, why not leave me a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget, you can leave me an anonymous voice note or with your name on SpeakPipe at bit.ly/SPKPDMP. And don't forget my TEDx talk where I talk about the connection between culture, race, and mental health. It's something you can watch in your break as it's just 12 minutes long. And that link is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves, WOLVESLO. And if you do enjoy it, please do leave a positive comment on YouTube, share and like. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and my Facebook business page. So do join me in 2 weeks' time where we'll be having more deep discussions. Until then, everyone, take care and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.